Claude Cowork is insanely powerful, but there's a problem. Right now, there's no gold standard on how to set up your workspace. So if you get the foundation wrong, you're gonna keep running into avoidable issues down the line. So after 5 months of using Cowork daily to run my entire life and going to debt to pay for token usage, here are 5 essential things to get right from day 1. Let's get started. Kicking things off with tip number 1, the Markdown Translator. As you know by now, Cowork's instructions and memory live in these .md markdown files. And although we can open them up and edit this directly, opening this just costs 20 tokens. Okay, that's a joke, but I kind of feel it's true. It's a pain to read like this, right? And annoying as hell to edit. So first, what you want to do is to install a free app called Obsidian, open folder as Vault, open, point it to your Cowork workspace folder, open. And now every .md file instantly renders with proper headings, bold text, and bullet points. Basically a much more readable format. And now let's say I want to change something in this Claude.md file. Instead of doing anything here, I can select the Claude.md tab in Obsidian and replace this first bullet point, for example, under preferences, with always make inappropriate jokes. And let's just remove that line from earlier. And I'm gonna close this and reopen. And you will see that the changes are already there. To be clear, you don't need to learn Obsidian or use any of its other features. It's just a lens to read and edit .md files. Pro tip, you can click Command and Control plus to zoom in. You can click the reading mode icon to lock the Obsidian page so you don't make edits by mistake. And you can even go to Obsidian settings, files and links, keep the show all file types toggle turned on. And this lets you see non.md files like spreadsheets, PDFs, and even images in the sidebar. Moving on to tip number 2, the 300 line rule. Because our root Claude.md loads every single session, a bloated file wastes a lot of tokens. And when I cut mine from over 600 lines to around 250, my token usage dropped by roughly 25%. And here are 3 tactics you can use right away. First, only include the bare essentials. My Claude.md template has 6 sections. First, this memory system section tells Cowork to always read MEMORY.md at session start so it knows what we did before. Next, preferences is how we want Cowork to communicate: tone, length, format, etc. Next, rules represent behavioral guardrails. Basically, if you want Cowork to always do something, like always ask clarifying questions before starting a complex task, or never do something, like never edit files in my workspace without telling me what you changed and why, those belong here. Heading over to my actual Claude.md, the routing map contains a table that Cowork checks to figure out which workstation to load based on my task. So if I'm writing an email, we load the Email HQ workstation. If I'm working on Chinese projects, load China Desk. If I'm brainstorming, use Clarity Partner, so on and so forth. Coming back to the lightweight template, since it's less dense, the 5th section, references, include 1-line pointers to files Cowork loads on demand. In other words, this voice principles.md file does not load every session, right? Only when I'm writing content. And finally, creating new workstations basically tells Cowork how to create new workstations in your workspace. Pro tip, the rule of thumb is to keep your Claude.md file between 200 and 250 lines, with 300 being the absolute maximum. You can also grab these Claude.md and MEMORY.md templates from my free Cowork toolkit linked down below. But Jeff, I hear you say, there's no way I can keep everything within 300 lines if I keep using Cowork. And that brings us to tactic number 2, ask Cowork to relocate non-essential rules. Here's the test. Does Cowork need this every session or only when a specific task comes up? Back in my actual Claude.md, there's a section called Governance MECE Principle that says all instructions and rules in this workspace must be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. And since this governs how all rules are organized in my entire Cowork workspace, this must be kept in my root Claude.md. In contrast, there's a file creation rule bullet point down here that only apply when I'm creating a new file. And since I'm not creating files every session, instead of having all 22 rules live here, I have a pointer. Read this before creating any new file in the workspace. Now, let's apply this learning immediately. Going back to the creating new workstations section from before, we don't create new workstations every session, right? So we can tell Cowork, Move the creating new workstation section out of my root Claude.md into a new reference file and replace it with a one-line pointer in my references table. And we're just gonna let this run. And after a few seconds, we can see what happened. First, even Cowork tells us that doing this keeps the root Claude.md leaner while preserving the template for on-demand loading, right? And opening the Obsidian view, we can see that the entire creating new workstation section has been removed. Instead, it's been replaced by a pointer. Hey, read this when creating a new workstation. And where does this workstation template.md live? Under the 00 resources folder. And as you can see, everything has been moved over here, and our Claude.md just got shorter without losing anything. It's that simple when it comes to optimizing your Claude.md. Find sections that serve specific tasks and ask Cowork to relocate them. Tactic number 3, write files in the right place. In a nutshell, most Cowork users put Claude.md content in memory.md and vice versa. And this confusion tanks output quality. The solution is adding a rule under Claude.md's memory system section. Test 1. If the entry is prescriptive and contains words like always and never, then it belongs in Claude.md. Test 2. If it describes a fact that could change, then it goes into memory.md. Scrolling down to the rules section, here we have an entry that says, before drafting a new email, check if a related thread already exists with that recipient. This is a version of before doing X, do Y, which is prescriptive behavior as well, right? That's why it belongs in Claude.md. Flipping over to the memory.md file and scrolling down, we see an entry here that says, my company uses Microsoft Copilot, which is something that could change tomorrow, right? Probably something that should change. Just kidding. So this is a temporary fact and not a rule. And that's why it belongs in memory.md. Here's something you can do right now. Tell Cowork to review my root Claude.md and memory.md. In the Claude.md file, flag any entry whose primary purpose is recording a fact or status rather than prescribing how you should behave, right? And in memory.md, flag any entry whose primary purpose is telling you how to behave rather than recording a fact. Recommend where each flagged entry should move. And after a minute or two, Cowork will share a list of recommendations. And here you can actually see there are 5 issues in my memory.md file, which obviously I left them in there on purpose to show you what not to do. I don't make mistakes. And luckily, my Claude.md is clean though. So I can just literally say, proceed with changes. And it's as easy as that. Speaking of optimizing our workspace, today's sponsor HubSpot put together a free resource called the Claude Cowork Stack that contains 12 Cowork optimized prompts you can use right away. There are a couple I found pretty useful, like this batch document generator one and the research synthesis one, this one, although I'd still probably use Claude Web for research. But my favorite by far, surprise, surprise, is this file management prompt. The one change I'd make to this is instead of choosing a primary sort by date or by project, tell it to organize following Tiago Forte's para method: projects, areas, resources, and archive. That way, every file lands in a bucket based on how actionable it is, not just what it looks like. This actually inspired me to create a scheduled task in Cowork that processes my iCloud inbox folder every morning, meaning Cowork sorts through the receipts, PDFs, random downloads I capture into the right folder automatically. You can grab the Claude Cowork Stack for free, link down below. Thank you HubSpot for sponsoring this video. All right, tip number 3, the memory diet. Just like your root Claude.md, your root memory.md also loads every single session. So a messy one wastes tokens and makes Cowork's output worse. So here are 3 things you can do. First, give your memory.md a clear structure. My root memory.md has 3 sections, with the first being active projects and work, which is a list of everything I'm currently working on with a short status next to each one. So Cowork immediately knows what's on my plate. Second, a scheduled tasks section that tracks all my automated recurring jobs so Cowork doesn't accidentally create duplicates or miss a task that already exists. And third, the core memory section stores persistent facts about me, like my career before becoming a full-time YouTuber, my LinkedIn URL, and my business address and how it's used. Basically, facts I need to reference all the time. Tactic number 2, set a hard ceiling. So remember how in my root Claude.md, I have a memory system section, and at the bottom here, there's actually a pointer to the full set of memory system rules. And if I open up that file, there are 2 things you should know. First, under entry format, there's a rule that says 1 to 2 sentences max for every memory entry, meaning Cowork writes concise entries from day one instead of long paragraphs that bloats your MEMORY.md file and wastes tokens. Next, under size ceiling section, there's a rule that reads, root MEMORY.md 150-line ceiling. When the ceiling is breached, the fix is always compression and archiving, never raising the ceiling. In plain English, this means when your MEMORY.md file inevitably reaches 150 lines, Cowork will automatically archive information that's no longer current, like things that happened 2 or 3 months ago. But wait a minute, where does that archived information go? Tactic number 3, create an archive.md. Here's a simple visualization. Your memory.md is a whiteboard that contains active projects and key facts you need to reference every day. Your archive.md is the filing cabinet with a complete record of everything you've done. And here's a key insight. Cowork does not read archive.md every session. It's only when you ask something like, what happened with the E-list 3 months ago? Does it then check the archive.md file to find the answer? And because archive.md isn't loaded at session start, it doesn't need to have a size ceiling, right? You can preserve everything you want without paying any token cost. To help you set this up, I have a prompt linked below that you can paste directly into Cowork like so. In the interest of time, I won't read the whole thing, but basically this prompt first creates your archive.md file, then adds the memory rules to your Claude.md, and teaches Cowork which entries to keep in memory.md and which to archive. Pro tip, you want to create a separate memory.md for each workstation and each project inside your workspace to reduce token usage. For example, when I ask Cowork something like, what's going on with my latest email campaign? Cowork first checks root memory.md to see the project exists, then jumps to the project memory.md to read project-specific information like Notion pages, email subject lines, past decisions, and current status. And this cascading setup is why my root memory.md has never gone above 100 lines, even after months of aggressive daily use. Next up, tip number 4, the Project Transplant. A lot of you asked about the relationship between Claude Projects and Cowork, and long story short, you want to migrate all your Claude projects into Cowork because Cowork doesn't face the same limitations as Claude Projects. For instance, I used to rely on this Claude project to write my weekly newsletter, and within this project, we have project instructions over here, a project knowledge file, and auto-generated project memory. Compared to Cowork, there are quite a few problems here. For example, if I wanted to make improvements to the project instructions, I would have to manually click in and type out something or paste in something, right? Second, clicking into the project memory, we see it's an AI-generated paragraph. I can't really structure or edit directly. This doesn't work really well. And third, even though I can link a Google Doc of past newsletter editions as a knowledge file, Claude can't write to this document directly either. I'd have to open the document and paste everything myself. All these issues can be addressed by migrating our Claude projects into Cowork, and the process is simple. The project instructions essentially become the workstation Claude.md file, project memory becomes the memory.md file, and knowledge files get added to the project resources folder. Here's what to do in practice. Open up a blank text document, go in and select all, copy the project instructions, and paste it into this document. Press enter twice, go back, click into project memory, select all of this, add a header 1, project memory, paste the project memory in as well, save this as a Markdown document, project info.md, save, all right? And then I can download my entire Google Doc as a Markdown file as well, all tabs. This might take a few moments, so I might fast forward this. In the meantime though, let's head on over to my free template. This is linked down below. Copy this simple migration prompt, paste it into Cowork, and then back in my downloads, share both the projectinfo.md and my Google Doc MD file into Cowork, and just let this run in order for the Claude project to be migrated into Cowork. All right, it's done. Let's go over what Cowork just did. First, it created a newsletter workstation folder. My newsletter is called Workspace Essentials, but this is a newsletter workstation folder. Second, it created a workstation Claude.md file that contains the same workflow as the original project instructions. Third, it created a memory.md file with labeled instructions that I can actually edit like so. And fourth, it created a resources folder with 3 separate resource files. One for audience and positioning, one for my recent newsletters, and one that extracted style patterns from my existing newsletters. As a bonus, we can even go back to our root Claude.md file and scrolling all the way down. You can see that under routing map, Cowork even added a new entry that maps to our newly created newsletter workstation. Now, whenever I want to make a change to any of those files, I can simply tell Cowork, hey, add a rule to my newsletter workstation. Each edition should have a maximum of 3 emojis. And Cowork will make the change directly in the newsletter Claude.md file, as you can see right here. And let's say I just published the latest issue. I can tell Cowork to add the latest edition to the newsletter examples file, paste in the copy, let it run, and after a minute, I'm not going to wait, I'm too impatient, it will be added to the newsletter examples recent markdown file. I cannot stress how much of a game changer this is compared to the regular chatbots. This is how our Cowork workspace compounds. Every improvement, every change we make today makes tomorrow's output better. By the way, if you want my complete system with pre-built workstation templates and a step-by-step walkthrough so you can skip the trial and error of building from scratch, I'm putting together a Cowork Academy course and you can sign up for the waitlist down below. Moving on to tip number 5, the skill check. A lot of you asked about skills versus workstations after my last video, so here's the difference in a nutshell. Back in my actual Cowork workspace, I say, I want to work on my next native weekly newsletter. What do I need to do again? And let's see what it says. All right, as you can see, Cowork first loaded my newsletter workstation for context, then laid out the workflow. But notice how a lot of these steps surfaces a decision I need to make. For example, step 1, do I have a topic in mind? Which Google application am I covering this week, right? This illustrates something important. This newsletter workflow cannot run on autopilot. I, the human, need to make decisions and judgment calls as part of the process. In contrast, once a newsletter draft is finalized, I can trigger my newsletter subject line skill, which takes the final draft, applies the instructions from the skill that can run on autopilot since it's just a checklist. And I'm going to fast forward a bit here. It'll give me 5 scored options. I know exactly what I'm getting back every time, and the only thing that changes is the content. Example number 2. I have a workstation audit skill that checks for misplaced rules, bloat, and gaps within a specific workstation folder to keep my workstations optimized and lean. The output is a report with an executive summary up front, followed by specific findings and recommendations. So the test for when to create a workstation versus a skill is actually pretty simple. Is this a place I work or a thing I do? If it's an ongoing area of work with its own voice and accumulated context, that's a workstation. If it's a repeatable process you want done the same way every time, that's a skill. If you found this helpful, check out my full Cowork playlist next. See you there, and in the meantime, have a great one.